Hello everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to Good Life Grilling. This is Solo. He's a service dog in training. But today what I wanted to cover was 5 things that I wish I knew when I'd started smoking meats. It would have made the beginning a whole lot easier. So let's get into them. The first thing is smoke. Smoke is attracted by 2 things, cold and wet. So when that meat is smoking and you're spritzing your apple juice or water or whatever it is you want on there, it's why you're doing it, so that smoke will attach itself better to that meat. But when you understand that it sticks to cold meat as well, or what that allows you to do is it allows you different options, whether it's bringing the meat right out of the fridge or even right out of the freezer. I've got a couple of videos, one on doing a reverse sear with frozen steak, and then I also did some roasts where I put them in at 11 o'clock at night, but I had pulled them right out of the freezer and I didn't put rub on them until about 7:40 the next morning. So when you want that good smoke ring, when you want that good smoke flavor, just knowing those 2 things helps a lot when it comes to the results. Now the second thing that I wish that I knew was about the temperatures in the smokers themselves. So you hear about these magic numbers like 225, 250, 275, 325, 350. Well, you also hear about terms low and slow. When I first started, I used to sit there and hover over my kettle trying to keep the temperatures at 225 or at 250, and because I thought I had to be right on. But the temperature range that you need to pay attention to when you're smoking meat is you want to keep it between that 220 and 275 range. 275 is if you want to get something done a little quicker, obviously. You want something that stays in the smoke a little longer, take it down to 220, 225. But don't fret if you're fluctuating between 220 and 250 or 260, because the same job's going to get done. It's just going to determine if you want it a little faster, have the temp a little bit higher. If you want it a little bit, or if you want it to stay in the smoke longer, then go lower temps around 225. Now, 325 to 350 or 375, that's chicken. So people can smoke brisket on 325. I've heard of them doing it. I don't know if I would. I think that's mainly a competition thing, but I could be wrong. You'll leave a message in the comments and let me know if I am. But don't fret about that temperature when you're starting out. Try to keep it between that 225, 275 range, and you'll be just fine. Now the third thing, first, say hi to Brogan, another service dog in training. The third thing is the stall. The stall's probably got more stories around it than any other thing in barbecue. So what the stall is, it's when the meat sweats and starts to cool itself off. And that hits a temperature where that's called a stall at around that 155, 160. Now the stall is important to understand because as the meat is sweating, it's also, if we go back to smoke, it's absorbing that smoke even better. And that's where a lot of that smoke ring comes into play. So the stall isn't anything to be worried about or concerned with, but I tell you what, I've had rounds and rounds and rounds with the stall in the very beginning because I didn't know what it was and couldn't figure out why my pork shoulder wouldn't go above 160 and why my wife was wondering why we couldn't eat or weren't eating until 11 o'clock at night because I couldn't figure out how to speed it up. So be able to get that really good smoke ring, you do want to leave it in the stall for as long as you can. As it's sweating, it's absorbing that smoke, and at the same time you're building that crust because that moisture is coming out of the meat and then it's drying and forming on that crust in your rub or whatever seasoning you have. So don't be concerned about that stall. In order to get out of that stall, you can either just leave it on the barbecue or on the smoker and let it go for until it gets to 203. That's normally when people are talking about those 10-12 hour smokes. But you can also speed it up by putting it in the Texas crutch, and that's just where you end up wrapping the meat and putting it in, whether it's your oven or back in the smoker, and that speeds up that process really quick to get it up to that 195, 200. I prefer 203. Here in Wyoming, higher elevation, for some reason 203 is better for me than 195. So hope that helps you out in that one. Now the fourth thing is salt. Salt is the only spice that absorbs into meat. So one of the things that I found that I like to do is I like to put the salt on the night before. That way it can absorb. Salt will absorb into meat a 1/4 inch the first hour and roughly about 1/8 of an inch every hour after that. So in order to make sure that you don't put too much on, what you want to know is that a 1/2 teaspoon of salt covers about 1 pound of meat. So another thing is to make sure that you're not doubling up is you need to understand that when you buy rubs and seasoning at the store, it's mainly full of salt. So if you're going to do that, put the salt on the night before. You really want to make sure that you're making your own rub at home there, so that way you can omit the salt and not double up on it. So that's it for tip number 4. Say hi to Arizona, another service dog in training. And last but not least, tip number 5, probably the one that is the most important, because no matter how good you smoke the meat, no matter how good a salting job you did, no matter how good the cut is, if you're going to cut slices, like through a brisket or a roast or anything like that, you've got to cut across the grain. When you see pictures or videos of people that are draping the brisket across their finger and it's folding and it's like a wet noodle, well, that's part of it. You could do everything right, and if you don't cut across the grain, it's going to be like a piece of jerky. It's just going to be tough. People may say, ooh, it tastes good, but yet they're having a hard time taking a bite out of it. So if there's anything, look at the grains before you put your spices or rub on it. Cut a notch or a slice out of it, just the corner, so you have an idea, because once the bark is formed, you put the rub on it, you're not going to be able to see which way those grains are going anymore. So pay attention to that, cut across the grains, and everything will fall right into place, and you didn't ruin it by miscutting it. So hope that helps you in that. And through all of this, I hope that it helps you out in the beginning if you're just starting out. If you've been doing it a while but yet you learned something new, awesome. If you liked it, leave some comments down, let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more. I'm trying to put a video out at least once a week. And if there's one thing that you take away from this, always remember, the best barbecue is the one you're at. Thanks, and have a good one. We'll see you.